I found it very nice representative of the I explained the situation. She said, well, I'm going to give you a one-time exception. We're going to change it without a change fee. Thank you very much. Thank you. I like that.
Oh, you need to use it? Cool.
Edward, what was that? No. The speaker before used my dock.
And I was just saying that, and I saw it plugged into his machine, so I said he needs to use it. So I was just, you get this.
Wow. Nobody took off your bundle? Do we still have your bundle?
That's correct.
Oh, make sure you
Yeah, it's the same
I
thing.
decided on sending it on email.
Oh, there. Oh, you wouldn't get much for it.
It wouldn't work the postage. Oh. Someone.
Yeah, this is what I did. Thanks a lot.
I don't know where I got this. I got it in a conference some other time, and I try to remember to bring it with me just because it means that things don't get twisted and it's yeah, always hit the right side. Of course.
So, hello everyone. This is going to be Opsawg Ops area. If you were here for the previous thing, you're of course welcome to stay, but you might not be interested. I don't understand why this is fascinating, but. Pardon? Yeah, might as well.
Oh, very good.
We will ask that.
You want to introduce the meeting?
Sure.
Let's wait for Bert. I want to confirm it.
Speaking of the speak of the devil.
All right. That's a clicker. Yeah, that's stupid. All right, break. We're good. Want to start?
Do we have an agenda slide? So hello everyone. This is going to be the ops area portion of ops area and Opsawg. Up on the slide, we had the note well a second ago, or we will in a second again. Please make sure that you note it well. Before we get started, as always, we will need a JavaScribe and minutes. Wes is JavaScribe. Thank you, Wes. Who would like to do minutes? Who would be willing to do minutes? Joel, thank you, sir. Okay, I can't actually see the slides. So, yep, note well, and then blue sheets will be going around. Please make sure that you actually fill in the blue sheets. If you don't, we don't get a reasonable size room again. And the slides are at the bottom URL. Next. And that's going to be the agenda. Does everyone have any agenda bashing? Are you expect to be presenting an aunt or the other way around?
So actually, we got a request from Ralph to present a chasm as a second item.
Great. Okay. So, do you want to do the sad?
So the first item on the agenda is a bit of transition here in the Ops area, if you have noticed. So I would like to welcome Warren first, and say a few words for Joel. So I think it was a fun ride. I would like to thank you for your years of service, for your knowledge, not only management but operational. It was very useful to me. I've been running a lot next to you, and I got a lot of respect for you. I believe we were somehow a good duo, at least from internally in the ISG. I believe we've been trying not to do too much damage in the Ops area. We've been having like weekly conference calls, discussing the topics in Ops and the IETF. Sometime with a virtual drink across the ocean, whiskey or gin tonic. And what I appreciate a lot is the different style of management, where I'm maybe more passionate. You're the guy, the quiet guy with the feet on the ground, who's sometimes telling me, well, that's fine. Look at this perspective. It's also fine, so don't worry. And I want to thank you for your years of service. That's a term that I never understood before I joined the ISG, right? But whenever you are on the ISG with the load and the constraint and all this, it's really years of service. And something that we should all know, because I have a lot of respect for that, is that you are paying for your own travel to come to the IETF and doing overtime for that. This is what I believe is the true spirit of the IETF. So thanks for that. And maybe finally, whenever I see you, whenever I saw you first with your long hair, teenager type of look, it seems that now you get something on the IETF and that you are like a grown up. So we've got like 2 gifts for you. The thing I like in the Ops is the people, and we have like this kind of tradition that we like songs, right, for special occasions. So Bert Winan, if you would like to come here to express how thankful we are for Joe and how sad we are.
But can I do it from here?
Yes, please.
I think my voice is loud enough. So I'll do the same song as I did for Scott Bradner, because I think it's very applicable. And in fact, mostly we do this song, to say somebody's really a good person when he is giving us lots of beer and drinks and food and everything. So, but I think this also is a good place to sing the same song to thank someone who did a lot of work for us. Zo, zo'n goeie hebben wij nog niet gehad. Zo'n goeie hebben wij nog niet gehad. Tralalala. Zo'n goeie hebben wij nog niet gehad. Zo'n goeie hebben wij nog niet gehad. Pam, pam. Dankjewel.
So yeah, I've known Joel for many years. It feels like a really long time. I don't know if it is as long, but it sure felt long. Joel was the working group chair back when I started doing stuff in Opsawg, and then he became AD and suggested maybe I would be willing to take over as working group chair. And he promised me it wasn't going to be that much work. Turns out he was kind of lying. And now he suggested that, I take over from him as Ops area AD, and he promised me it wasn't going to be that much work. And I've got a horrible feeling he's been lying.
Yeah, so I can't claim that being on the ISG caused me to lose all my hair, since I still have much of it, and my grandfather is actually to blame for most of this. But Warren has a head start, so he should be fine. Yeah, I hope I haven't done too much damage. I hope that the new work that we've started here is something that we can persist on, and I look forward to being an actual contributor as opposed to pushing most of your paper and making your working group chairs get their reports in on time. So I am looking forward to coming back as a member of the community and as an individual contributor. So I'm not going anywhere in the immediate future.
So thank you. Yeah, many people are very sad that you're leaving. We sort of passed the hat around, and so we've collected a bunch of donations from a large number of people. Yep, I know. And we'd like to present you with a small gift. It seems that maybe giving you alcohol at the beginning of your term would have been a better thing, but we didn't get that organized then. So, and thanks to everyone who contributed.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, we may actually have to share that.
All right, so back to work, I guess. So we had a chasm BOF on Monday. Ralph, are you in the room to say a few words about this? To advertise the BOF if you don't know yet what it's about.
Hi, I'm Ralph Drums. I was one of the co-chairs of the BOF. This is a chasm BOF. It's coordinated address space management. It's a non-working group forming BOF. And the abstract, sort of taken from the description of the BOF in the wiki, is organizations use IP address space management systems tools to manage their IP address space, often with proprietary databases and interfaces. The work in the chasm BOF, the work in the chasm space, is intended to evolve standardized interfaces and data representations for coordinated management of IP addresses. So there are a lot of ad hoc and proprietary mechanisms for representing address space and the interfaces for acting on those representations. And the idea behind this BOF is to generate some standardized ways for those IPAM components to communicate. The overall schedule for the BOF was roughly 5 minutes of admin overhead to begin with, 40 minutes of presentations, 40 minutes of discussion, and a 5-minute summary at the end. I would say that the BOF was well attended and there was good discussion during the BOF. The requirements for the BOF are coming from providers and enterprises and RIRs, so it was really the customers of this work that were there represented. And finally, the chairs say that the scope of the work isn't completely fully clear yet. There's the work is coming from sort of two different directions. One is a very small scope of a set of APIs that are already in place versus trying to abstract the requirements out to a much larger set of requirements and generate a more comprehensive set of APIs and data representations. We asked some of the RFC 5434 questions. 5434 is the how to run a good BOF RFC. We only asked the first 3 questions because it's not a working group forming BOF, so the questions about should we form a working group didn't seem all that relevant. So the first question is there a critical mass of participants willing to work on the problem? And the answer to that is, oh, I'm sorry, the first question is there a problem that needs to be solved, and is the IETF the right group to solve that problem? And the almost unanimous answer was yes. Very strong support. There was one sort of quiet hum from one person when answering no to that question. The second question is there a critical mass of participants willing to work on the problem? We got about 20 hands when we put that question up, and we asked then the qualifying question, you know, are you vendors, are you operators, are you registrars? And it was sort of equally split amongst those groups. So it's a good mix of people and a good core group of people that are willing to work on the problem. And then finally, is the scope of the problem well defined and understood? The answer to that was a split answer, but more no. So the consensus was no, that we need to do more work on the scope and definition of the problem before anybody actually tries to solve those problems. That's pretty much it. Questions?
Hi, Adrian Farrell. Yeah, thanks for that, Ralph. I'm now in a BOF overload state, but I think it was this BOF where there was a follow-up question to that, which was, do people think that this is a problem where the scope could be successfully defined.
Oh, yes, thank you. I missed that one. Yes, I missed that in the notes. So that was a good question. If you don't think that the scope is well defined, there's also the question of does the group think that it could be well defined in the future? And the answer to that was the consensus was yes. It wasn't unanimous, but the consensus was yes. It could be well defined with more work. So it seems like it's worth asking the proponents to go off and do that work and come back and try again. Thanks, Adrian. It's a good question. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have David Black? Oh, okay.
So I'm going to talk briefly about some work that's going to be going on over in the routing working group. To make the real quick summary is that there's a use. Let's go to the next slide. We have another standards organization, DMTF, the Distributed Management Task Force, that's defining a management standard for converged infrastructure. I'll show you in a minute what that's about. And in order to do networking management, they're reusing Yang. This is all running code. And got colleagues here who will explain a little bit about how that works. Goal here is, over my routing working group, is to define a profile for top of rack switches in converged infrastructure so that you can write manage software once and it'll work on anything there. And the work's going to be done in the IETF, so the profile is reusable wherever anybody's using Yang. Let me do one quick slide to do motivation and problem, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues who did most of the work to explain what we've done and where we're going. So next slide. This is converged infrastructure. That whole rack is a system. It's about 84U of servers, networking, and storage. There might be, and power supplies and some other stuff. There might be 4U networking in here. This thing is built and integrated as at the factory, ships as a rack, is installed as a rack, is cabled as a rack, and needs to be managed as a rack, single pane of glass or virtual glass. And so the goal here is to do the management network in the context of management of the whole system. And Redfish is an emerging standard in this space to do this kind of rack scale infrastructure management. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe White to explain a little bit more about what we're doing. We're looking for people who are interested in this to help out with the device profile work that we think we need to do to support this. Joe?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So next slide. So if you say, what is Redfish? Its intent is to create an interface for converged systems and an interface for servers that replaces IPMI, and it's going to become an interface that replaces SMIS for storage under something called Swordfish for SNIA. For the networking part, we didn't want to reinvent how you define network devices and network elements and the features of networking. So we said, can we take Yang and expose it via Redfish? And we figured out you could. And we did that to basically tie all of these things together, okay? Because customers have been telling us, we want a single interface to manage everything. We want to have something that's powerful. Servers used to have something called IPMI, which wasn't intelligent enough, even though it was called Intelligent Platform Management Interface. And so server guys got together in about 2014 with the release first published in 2015 and continuous updates to handle more and more complex devices and more complex situations. And Redfish has spun out into OCP, TGG, UFI, and SNIA, as I said. Next slide. Okay. So server, storage, network, all done together, single interface. Okay. Makes sense, right? If I have systems, why don't I want to manage all systems the same way? Especially when I've got a data center pod done for variable workloads and things like that. Redfish is also expanding into a whole variety of sub areas like composable systems and PCI fabric definitions and things like that in parallel. Next slide. Okay, so how do we do it? We basically say we're going to transform, we're going to take the Yang containers and everything that looks like a container, including the Yang modules themselves, and we're going to expose those as entities in something called CSDL, which is Common Schema Definition Language, which is an OData term. Then we're going to translate that to JSON schema, so you can just use JSON messages over HTTP to manage it. So in the end, it's very straightforward. You can go pull your JSON schema metadata file. You could go pull your XML CSDL metadata file, so you can understand what you're supposed to be doing, all the types, all the annotations, all the conditionals. And then you can just send JSON messages to that device to manage it. And all done as a RESTful interface. And the common part is important: chassis, thermal, logs, firmware, and so on. That's a very important part. Reusing Yang is an important part. Next slide. Okay. So here's a little cartoon of what I just summarized. And you can see Yang mapping spec. So we have a full faithful mapping spec. We took all of the elements of the Yang 1.0 from 1620 plus its errata, 6020 plus its errata, and we mapped those over. And then everything in here can all be automated as well in terms of the mapping and the creation. And there's a rich tool set. The SPMF is the subgroup that does Redfish within DMTF, and there's a rich set of tools. There are a lot of examples. There's running code on servers now. So various server vendors have Redfish in their baseboard controllers and other parts of their systems today. And the full thing is defined, and you can access it all. And I think that was the last slide we wanted to cover. One more slide, let's see. Yeah, so this is the details of the mapping, which I'm not going to cover, so go back. Okay. So questions? I know I gave you the whirlwind tour, but we only had a 10-minute slot here. So go back a slide, please. Okay. Yes, sir.
Kent Watson, Juniper Networks. I'm happy to see the reuse of Yang, but I'm wondering why convert Yang to this other protocol and instead of using RESTconf directly?
Because we want a common access methodology. So Redfish uses OData to move particularly formatted JSON messages with particular metadata that's within the overall Redfish protocol family. So Redfish already has a whole set of protocols to manage server, and that's going to be applied to storage. And so we want the same thing applied to the networking for converged infrastructure. And so that's why. It's because to be in common with server and storage for the protocol and the methodology and the way you define the containment of the object. So if you go back one more slide, see we have an abstraction here, network device, which is very similar to the routing working group notion of a network device that contains a set of Yang modules that are exposed via that slice of the system. And so wherever your management touch point is, you can subdivide it into however many network devices you want, take a set of Yang modules, compile them into CSDL, and expose that as your schema. And then you want to access it the same way you do everything else in that chunk of your data center. So RESTconf could live along, in parallel, and maybe there's some ideas we could take from RESTconf. We've looked at RESTconf, but it's not a take over for RESTconf. It's pick what you need to do your job is our approach.
So I think I heard it was an existing protocol and it was easier to map the Yang into your existing protocol. But would the inverse be possible? I mean, could you in the future maybe map the existing protocol into RESTconf?
So in principle, you could take the CSDL files, which is an XML definition of a schema with an entity relationship, and re-expose those via a different outbound interface. That's certainly in principle. We've never looked at that, didn't have the call because, again, all the server guys got together and said, Redfish is it. SNIA got together and said, Swordfish, which is Redfish for storage, is it.
Okay, so it's possible, but it may not make sense.
It's certainly technically possible. I mean, I've thought about it a little bit, but there's not a big call for it within the SPMF, DMTF, server management, conversion management. Go ahead, John.
One of the reasons we chose OData was that it was a far more expressive language for defining schema, and it's actually a standard owned by Oasis. What we've found is that it's sufficient that you can actually find a new Redfish endpoint, introspect the entire OData, and auto-generate all the client-side code. And we've had a demonstration from one of our vendors where they've been able to attach and auto-generate all the script files and start chaining them together. So,
Okay.
so that's a functionality you would get as part of.
And I think maybe another answer to this is that this work predates the standardization of RESTconf.
It does. And one more answer is on the second slide I showed. We're trying to manage, say, an 84U rack of gear, of which 2 to 4U is networking. The other 80 or 80 plus U is Redfish already running code. And so the single pane of glass approach to that rack, Redfish is just an obvious starting point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
So it's very nice that you don't invent the wheel and use what we're doing here. And what is your ask? You would like to get expertise on the Yang models to get the profile for data center networking, typically top of the rack switch, and you would like to get the expertise on or participation on defining the profile. Is this?
Yes, all the above. We're looking for interest, help, advice, even the occasional dead cat or rotten tomato.
Because there is something which is quite important we've been telling this week is that, yes, we start to have Yang models. There is something that we want to make sure is that they all work together. And I'm hoping that looking this from a profile point of view might be helpful there. So while we have people defining those Yang models, if you could just start reviewing them and say, we're missing that in that module, we're missing the link between those two, etc. That would be pretty useful.
Yeah, and in point of fact, that's exactly what we're doing, and that's what we're asking. Because what we have is another draft, which is a baseline switch profile, which is a simple L2, L3 TOR for converged infrastructure, and what's the minimum spanning set of Yang models to manage that are published as IETF drafts or RFCs. There are other ways you could go invent that. We know of examples, and those are perfectly good. But we want the minimum spanning set for baseline switch as our first profile. So you can see the things we've spec'd out already as an outline that's very rough. And any input or expertise or advice that's like, oh no, you should go use this one, or oh, here's where this is going to evolve to give you what you say you want would be perfect. Thank you.
Joe Clark, Cisco. I don't know if you're familiar with the Open Config Yang catalog. This might be something to insert if you develop a profile that says these Yang modules represent this type of thing, to have something as an extension there to say, okay, this is what these are the models I would need in order to manage this under the Redfish paradigm.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, that actually, we talked about that a tiny bit before, but it was brought home to me much more strongly this time, listening to the library update this week, and then talking to people. So thank you. That's a good comment.
All right, thank you. So if you don't get what you need at the end of the week in terms of contact, please let me know, because I believe that whenever we have got customers, in this case being in a different SDO, wanted to use what we're doing and wanted to invest time to make sure we do the right thing, that's important.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we've got Joel back on Cider. Or Chris, or
Joel.
Or Joel, or.
Hi, I guess I'll do it up here. Are you want me to go there?
Kind of stand over here.
Pink box.
I know.
I got into the penalty box and didn't even punch anybody's teeth out. Okay, I'm Chris Morrow. I'm one of the two co-chairs for the Cider Ops working group. Cider Ops working group is the operational spin off of the protocol for work done for Cider, secure interdomain routing. We had our first actual face-to-face meeting this week. We have 4 drafts that are being worked on, one that's expired and got moved over from Cider. you can read most of that stuff and the charter on the tools page. If there's any questions about the work, I guess, speak up. Go once, twice, no more penalty box.
I will comment on that just briefly from the mic. I think like one of the places that we are with CIDR is that actually having a standard that has stabilized has been a long time in coming. And the expectation is that therefore the hard work on getting that thing to gel and actually out of the working group is now done. And so that to the extent that there are tweaks needed to the protocol, those are expected to be done in IDR, and that the CIDR ops activity is largely around refining the way that we use it and the tooling associated with it and our experience with it in terms of actually maturing and stabilizing this thing so that it's usable.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we were ultimately hoping to achieve here.
Great. Anything else on the CIDR ops? Questions? Notes? Oh, the blue sheet is still circulating. If anyone hasn't signed it, there's one over there. Please sign it. So I guess we're now moving on to the ops area open mic session. Does anybody have any open ops area questions?
Adrian Farrell, I just wanted to give an update on a piece of work that was crossing working groups, which was the Yang module classification type stuff. Those of you who've been watching know that there's a draft in NetMod and a draft that Ching-Woo and I have brought to Ops Area Working Group, and one sort of classifying in one dimension, the others classifying in a different direction, and they were blocking each other. I had a meeting today with Dan Bogdanovich, and we discovered we were actually in violent agreement, but just using different words to describe the same thing. So we think his document in NetMod is actually cool and ready to go, and we just need to realign the words in the Ops Area document.
And Adrian, before you move too far. So do you agree that the classification document NetMod is good to go and should be shipped?
Yes, I believe so. He's done. He did a recent respin with a few tweaks and an extra paragraph, and I'm cool with that. But obviously, it's a working group document, so.
Right. Thank you.
Moving on to Ops AWG?
Yeah.
So we're going to be moving on to the Ops AWG section of the agenda. Hopefully the JavaScribes and minute takers are willing to continue doing so. I'd also like to introduce Ignas, who will say a few words about himself. But I'd also first like to mention that one of the things I've learned over the years in Ops AWG especially, and now Ops Area, is my updated fashion sense. Benoit and I learned about blue shirts from Scott Bradner, the IETF SOB thing. And what Joel has taught me is, khakis and black t-shirts are the way to go. So, takes a while, but eventually I do actually learn things. And with that, let's move over to Ops AWG. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So to start the meeting with the introduction, I'm Ignas Bogdanas, new Warren for this working group. And a few words on the background side. I'm an operator myself. Formal affiliation is with Equinix, and I've been on the operational side of the House of the Networks for quite a while. Hopefully that would come of use for this group. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think we can go on. Firstly, I would like to state the working group status. Right now, we have 3 active working group documents. First one is the BGP community, IE extension for IPFix. We adopted this document several weeks ago, and later they also will report the update. The second one is MUD, manufacturer usage description. It's now in working group last call, and it's last chance of our working group to improve this document. So I sincerely encourage people to read and comment. The last one is TACUS protocol. The authors addressed all the comments from the last call, and we will do a second working group last call, maybe right after this meeting. And all of those documents are very readable, and we encourage you to review and comments. Next. We have 5 topics in the agenda, so I think we can start the discussion. First one, Zhenqiang, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhenqiang Li from China Mobile. Today, I'm here mainly to briefly report the current status of this draft.
You can use it click yourself if you wish.
First of all, the main content, traffic aggregation in BP community granularity is useful for several applications, such as the traffic engineering in backbone network. So this draft introduces 3 new information elements in IPFix to export the BGP community information of a specific traffic flow. For the current status, this doc was adopted by the working group just a couple of weeks ago. In this version, the security considerations and ANA considerations are improved according to the comments during the working group core adoption. The following 2 significant questions were also discussed during the core adoption period. The first one is, does one IPFix message have enough space to fit all the communities related to a specific flow? At the bottom of this page, there are 2 figures. The left one is the BGP message header, and the right one is for the IPFix message header. We can see that they both have a length field in 16-bit, but the maximum length of one BGP message is 4 kilobytes as per RFC 4271, and 64 kilobytes for one IPFix message. And we all know the BGP community is a path attribute distributed in an update message. So the length of the community cannot exceed the whole BGP message length, that is 4 kilobytes. So I think it is okay to fit all the community information corresponding to both the source IP address and the destination IP address of a specific traffic flow into one IPFix message. But To confirm that, I will request for comments in the IDR working group mail list. If the working group can help us, it's better. The second question is, do we need to cover other kinds of BGP communities? At present, BGP defines standard community, extended community, large community, and wide community. So a lot of them. The standard community has already been covered in the current version. For the extended community, the answer is probably no, because extended community is mainly used for root target actions in BGP photo spec and some additional information used in Ethernet VPN. The application purpose is totally different from the standard community. For the large community, the answer is probably yes, because large community is defined to accommodate the 4-octet autonomous system numbers. It has the same application purpose as standard community. So I will do it in the next version to cover large community. For wide community, the answer is probably no. Or if we do need to cover it, I think cover it in a separated draft is better, because the wide community has totally different format, as shown at the bottom of this page. One wide community itself is variable in length. So if we want to cover it in IPFix, we have to define new structures accordingly. Again, thank you all for the comments in the mailing list during the working group adoption call. For next steps, please read the draft and comments in the mail list, and I will modify the draft according to the comments consensus and to make it mature for working group last call. That's it. Thank you.
Ignas Bogdanas Akunik speaking as an individual. A couple of comments on message size and on the community types. If you could go one slide back. Let's send that slide 3. The size of the BGP message quite soon will be much larger than this. And it certainly will be able to carry much more of the communities. So it does seem logical to try to address that from the beginning. This is the whole question of whether all the AS numbers represented by communities can be carried by the unfragmented IPFix message. And that might open a rather heavy discussion on whether the fragmentation is needed in IPFix at all. So this is something that needs to be considered. Mm-hmm. And the second one, if you could go to the next slide, on the community types. Extended communities are used not only for specific address families, but also in IPv4v6 unicast too, especially in the Internet Exchanges environment, for a reason that there was no alternative previously. It's roughly about between 10 and 20%, and depending on where you are in the network, you might see those communities being used for signaling AS4s. Regarding the wide communities, what this document focuses on is, in fact, the AS numbers. It's not necessarily the whole structure of the container that can be used in the wide communities. So probably you should not be too much concerned that the encoding looks very different, but only on the AS numbers, and to that it seems equivalent, leaving aside the implementation and deployment aspects of wide communities. So the summary of this, that probably it would be more practical to have everything in one document than to develop separate small documents which try to address each and every particular community type.
But if we cover all those kind of communities in one, and just we have to do lots of work to cover the white communities.
White communities probably are a bit special because of the status of the specification and status of deployment. And what you are concerned in your document is the AS numbers carried in white communities and not white communities themselves. So probably that eases a problem a little bit.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. If we go back to the previous slide, Igna's point to that the BGP messages will get larger is quite clear. I'm not completely sure what type of concern has to be taken about the size here, because you need space in the IPFix messages, but you also need to have a look at where the implementations need space for actually storing the stuff. If I'm not an implementer, I never have touched router code, but my understanding is that for some of the IPFix message generation, actually data structures on the line cards are actually used. And I guess those will blow up if the IPFix needs kind of unrestrained numbers of communities and other stuff to be present there. Also, I would think that protecting IPFix message size and the load on the transmission channel for IPFix, it probably would be wise not to say we expect everything that happens to be on a BGP route as some kind of community attribute to be reflected on the IPFix, but I somewhat suspect that reasonable implementations actually will require the possibility to specify filters to limit the attributes that actually go there. And then the question of how large are IPFix messages and how large are BGP messages, they are completely decoupled. So that's the thing on the size and the BGP updates. Please move forward to the next thing. I also wanted to give my view on what support for, well, okay, next one, please. That's yes. Well, okay. The overview of what types of communities to support. I'm mostly concerned about the traditional communities and the large communities that have come out recently. And one of my comments is any implementation of this will be on routers that definitely will have an implementation of large communities. And my view of future development is that essentially the usage by operators will migrate from the old limited standard communities to the large communities. And I would strongly suggest to focus on supporting the large communities and potentially instead of offering a different version of support, to look that we can actually embed the 30-bit code space of the standard communities into the 96-bit code space of the large communities. I think that has not been discussed in the open. There are very simple ways to do it. And I think work on this stuff starting right now should actually head that way, with the view that the standard communities at some point in time will be actually used as a historic artifact.
Thank you. So I will collect more comments in the mail list to reach the consensus.
Yep. Yeah, this is a comment more than a question, but yeah, I agree with Rudiger that there are definitely cases where you cannot actually implement it this way, like even if you wanted to, because you don't have the information available to you. That's actually fine, and I don't think we should worry about that. So we should, recourse to this information comes from the RIB. So if you're not actually doing your IPFix export from someplace where you have access to the RIB, then you don't have this information. That's cool. That just means you can't do it inline. So that means other platforms where that's possible, you will. So that, I mean, and this applies to all sorts of information that we could potentially add via IPFix. If it's not available to you, it's not usable on that platform, but so what? Use it where it is usable. I think this is important information to be carried around in some systems.
Can I please ask for a show of hands of who has read the current version of the document? And subsequent question, how many of those are operators? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So next, MUD updates.
Next mod.
Okay. There's a clicker if you want to use that.
Okay. Can you look at the slides?
In a moment.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elliot. So this is about manufacturer usage descriptions. And this is draft IETF Opsawg MUD-05. As Tianren mentioned earlier, this document's in working group last call. So here's the status. Well, it's in working group last call. Ta-da. The next point I want to make is that this document normatively uses draft IETF NetMod ACL model, which has completed working group last call, but has not yet been shipped out. And there seems to be some squabbles on getting it out. Kent and I have been talking. He's in the room. The point I would want to make is that MUD, the concept, does not rely on a specific ACL model, but I just need something, and the working group needs something. This working group needs something that is out the door and stable, and the ACL model in NetMod has been being worked on for several years at this point, off and on. And so my message to the NetMod working group is,
Get on with it.
okay, so let's see here. We have a little bit of implementation experience. We've gotten a few bit of comments here and there, and I'll talk a little bit about those. And I'm seeking more comments. And I think the authors are seeking more comments. I think a working group should probably have a few more comments to say about this. Okay, so the comments that we've received thus far, one of which is that the file needs to have, or should have, an attribute that indicates how a URL is advertised. By device, or how it should be advertised by the device. Here's the issue. you have several choices as to how a device can emit this URL. It can do so with IEEE 802.1AR on top of TLS. You can do it with LLDP, or you can do it with DHCP. And who knows, there might be more methods that you might want to put out this URL if you happen to be a device. But that means that if the network is capable of 802.1x and only sees the URL via LLDP, and the device is capable of putting the thing out using 802.1x, then there's the possibility of a downgrade attack, and you want to alert the implementation that there is this potential for downgrade attack. So this was proposed by Max Pritikin, and I think it's a good idea. And so what I propose is to add this into the draft. And so before I continue, are there any comments on this approach? Okay. Then moving on, let's see here, a list of extension names to be used. Yes. So Max also pointed out something else, which is we say that MUD is extensible. However, there's a little hitch, which is the idea is that you should be able to use additional augmentations into MUD. But we don't say how. And we were unclear on how. And we have to have at least a list of extension names that are enumerated inside the file, so that people can tell that the file is in fact legitimate, and they can also make sure that they're that they're parsing the file correctly. So we have to stick something in the front essentially that says here are any extensions that are being used, and that way you know that you're parsing the thing and interpreting it correctly. I think this is appropriate to put in, and if anybody has any objections, what I'll do is I'll just add a container at the top that essentially says, here are the extensions. Any objection to that? Okay. Then moving on. All right, let's see here. We got a recommendation which is no longer anonymous, that the update timers for should be clearer. That is to say, Tim posted this to the list. And more to the point, he said the times should be shorter in terms of the minimum update times. And the idea is, if you're under some sort of attack, and you as a device manufacturer know how to mitigate the attack through at least initially a MUD file change, you'd like to get that out fast, and you'd like devices to pick up or the network to pick up the change quicker. So he has some recommendations. Proposed recommendations in the draft to drop the recommended time, and now I have to go to the message. Excuse me. Let's see here. So let me just find this. And Tim's in the room, so right. I think the time that you're suggesting is 168 hours as the you'd like that to be the high bit, as in things should be, you should check no less frequently than 7 days, and then and so what we could do along those lines is actually put a restriction on the type such that the value can't exceed that, and if people want, I can do that. Does anybody have a comment on that? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'll propose something more specific to the list over time. This comment came in yesterday, so I think I want to think about it. We ran into one more internationalization issue that's in the file, which is that the description itself, in the meta information, it needs to be well internationalized. And the easiest way to deal with that is to make it a URL as opposed to text, and point it off to a web page, which can then be in whatever language you want to click on. And so that's what I propose to do, is to change that field from text to URL. Okay, so then there was sort of a bigger issue. And the bigger issue is bigger than MUD. Yeah, all right, Rudiger's sitting there thinking, there's got to be a pun in there somewhere. So the issue that we have is that right now the device puts out a URL that is a well-known URI that suffix with .mud. And Max has, over in Anima, the Brewski draft, which needs to put out another URL for the Masa server. And other people might have other things that they want to alert the network or regarding for whatever purposes they have. And so the proposal that Max has is to generalize this so that all that the device puts out is a well-known URI suffix with a well-known origin, with the origin of wherever you're going in terms of the manufacturer. And then you append to then the application within the network, like the MUD controller, appends something like question mark, give me the MUD file, or the Anima registrar appends to that question mark, I need to go talk to the Masa server. And so you route based on a query or something like that. Now we can do that, and that way the benefit of that is you only have to register one of these things in terms of X509 certificate extensions, but there are a couple of, and that's nice because it keeps the certificate nice and small inside of an 802.1 AR certificate. The bad part of that is that it means you have to add a little bit more complexity both in the network implementation and, more importantly, because we network people don't mind a little bit of complexity in our implementations, can we then just sort of sell that to you? But on the other end, the manufacturers, like the light bulb people or the refrigerator people, actually have to add additional complexity into their implementations. And that's the thing I'm a little bit more concerned about. So the trade-off here is size of the cert, which impacts that manufacturer's COGS, versus and a little bit more complexity in terms of the manufacturer's web server. So those are the two sort of trade-offs that I see. And I think the best people to ask to answer that question are manufacturers, since they are the ones that have to make the trade-off. So what I propose to do with this is to ask manufacturers to go around and ask a few of the people that we're talking to, but I would invite this group to do the same. So if you're talking to a Panasonic or an LG or a light bulb company or an auto manufacturer that would be interested in this sort of onboarding technology, the question is, does 40 bytes matter in the cert, or 50 bytes because it's going to be additional whatever number of bytes for a URL, right? And a little bit of complexity, or do you want to handle the complexity on the other end? So what I propose to do is do a little bit of a survey as part of this process, and then come back to you with what I've heard, and then what I would say is we call the question on the Opsawg list. How does that sound? Okay, I don't hear any objections. The last two issues then are from Tim, which I didn't include in the slides because, well, they came in yesterday. But thank you, Tim, for the comments. I really appreciate it. So then Tim raises a couple of points, one of which is that in terms of legacy gear, it might be possible to, in some way, proxy this functionality. And the draft should be clearer on the separation between the MUD URL, the file, and how the file is retrieved. Am I capturing your concern correctly, Tim? I agree. And so what I propose to do then on that is to do just that, to make sure that there is this architectural separation between the URL, the means that it is resolved, and how the file is gotten. So we'll make sure that that separation is there. What I propose to do is to come back with a proposal on list to deal with that. Okay. Then Tim also raised another concern. Let's see here. This is okay. Yes. Right. Tim is concerned, and I share his concern to a certain extent, that the fact that manufacturers have these files might lessen their incentive to actually fix bugs. I said that I would do this, so I will do this. I will scream from the rooftops every time we talk about these mechanisms that this is just an additional layer of protection that the network can provide. It does not alleviate the responsibility of manufacturers to actually do the right thing and update their software when they have bugs. And for that matter, to leave bad software out, like, I don't know, leftover telnet servers in devices, or God help us, you know, directory traversal bugs in refrigerators.
Bert Wijnen, Huawei. I would even say that instead of just shouting it from the rooftops, is to maybe set a little warning at the beginning of whatever the RFC becomes, that that's what you want them to do, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Absolutely happy to do that. If I could record a song from you, Bert, that does this too, and stick that in the RFC, I would do that too. Okay, and then let's see here. Right, and then there's the last point that Tim raises, which is something that we have sort of left on the floor for now. And that is, how is it, suppose the device changes its configuration in some way that would better fit a different type of MUD file. This is possible today, but with a trade-off. And the trade-off is as follows. If you're updating your software in a normal device and you're using HTTP and you're using DHCP or LLDP to get the file to get the MUD URL, you can just update the MUD URL, and this works fine. However, if you're using a certificate-based approach, a device certificate-based approach, the assertion of that URL isn't from the device; it's from the manufacturer. And updating the software doesn't update that manufacturer certificate and doesn't update that assertion. So the way I would choose to deal with this is to indicate this problem in the draft, to indicate this issue in the draft, to say it's possible in these two circumstances to do what you say, Tim. However, the cost is that the assertion would be coming from the device and not the manufacturer, and that's an important distinction, because when the device is making the assertion, the device can lie. It's far less likely, and will, by the way, once it's broken into. It's going to go from saying I'm a measly little light bulb to I'm a refrigerator or something else, just so that it gains whatever access it can gain, and you have to be careful in your network to deal with that. So we really want to encourage the use of a certificate-based approach. And my thinking is that as we evolve the concept, we're going to find ways to use mechanisms like NEA, for instance, to address how to establish what the profile of the device is, perhaps through remote attestation models or other things that are, I think, perhaps a little bit more secure than just the device says, now my DHCP, thing is this. So that's how I propose to deal with that for now. Is that acceptable?
So I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. I think actually that the draft, as it's stated, as things are set, is fine. I did want to understand whether that problem could exist, because I wasn't absolutely clear that I understood enough about the Yang modules that I'd gotten that right. I think it's enough to say that, yeah, there is this situation that could occur, but I don't think that that's a deal breaker from my point of view. So I'm good with that.
Okay. We're to the point where I'm done with my issues list, by the way, so if there are comments or questions.
Camp Watson, Juniper Networks. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible, instead of putting the URL into the IWD certificate, to instead allow the controller that's terminating the TLS connection to then do an RPC back to the device, like, using, like the device is doing call home, and basically reaches back using netconf or restconf or whatever, and then pulls out the MUD, the URL that way. Of course, to be under, so the point being is that at least then it could be updated through normal software mechanisms as well. The identity certificate is persistent and constant.
So I would say, I would want to see that fleshed out a little bit. That is to say, right now we have sort of a model where that's, what we want to make sure is that you cannot, where if a device is hacked, it just doesn't start putting out some different certificate of some form. We want the assertion to be from the manufacturer. That is the goal in a secure fashion. And so long as that can be captured, I would be open to other approaches.
It would still be from the manufacturer in that case.
So let's work on I'll tell you what, Ken, let's work on the flow on that, because I don't think we want to eliminate the possibility of using IEEE 802.1AR, because the nice thing about that is you don't even get an IP address until you've asserted what it is you are. And that's the thing I like.
So, Elliot, I know you were talking about the ACL model.
You got to use your name.
Sorry, Mahesh Jetanandani, Cisco Systems. So you're talking about the ACL model and you flicked past with your assertion. So in Kent's defense, I just wanted to point out.
Oh, I don't blame Kent, Mahesh.
No, I hope you're not, but I know you would like to get it through, but I just wanted to let you know that the model as defined doesn't work for Cisco.
So we're going to have to talk about this offline, but you guys have to get something out in the NetMod working group. This is 2.5 years now.
True, but we're just letting you know that one of the reasons why it's been taking, or it's held up right now, is because somebody actually took a look at the model and decided that there were some issues with it that we needed to address before we could progress.
Okay, get the issues on the list and let's get them done. Because, and by the way, I hear from you a commitment to actually finish the work.
Sorry?
I have from you a commitment to actually finish the work.
I would say yes.
That's the right answer. And I'll add in a timely fashion.
The keyword being timely, yes.
Thank you. Write that down. So what I think this means, I apologize for taking this much time.
It's okay, we still have time.
Okay, what I think this means then is I will do another rev of the draft. I have these issues to post. We'll do another rev of the draft, but we cannot close the draft until Mahesh and friends have finished their work, and that will require one last review and perhaps a couple of tweaks to the model. Okay?
We have a commitment from Mahesh in minutes, so he has no other choice.
You said you have a commitment from him in minutes. So he'll get it done in minutes.
Just to let you know, I'm not an author on the draft. I'm just conveying a message based on the discussion we have had. So Ken can probably provide.
Okay. I think
Because
that
he's the
everybody has heard my pleas. And for those who are, blocking the works, it is time to unblock. Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions, comments? So look for another version of the draft and some comments on the list and another version of the draft. And one last plea for something else, which is I would very, very much appreciate, I think all the authors and those who are working on this would very, very much appreciate reviews. If we can get a few more, that would, I think, really also just help us in terms of putting out good work at the IETF. And so that people have an understanding as to my own thinking, MUD is still a pretty recent concept. And we're using proposed standard, the direction of proposed standard here in the original meaning. That is, we're going to, manufacturers outside the industry, outside the IETF, they look to us to say, well, get out an RFC and then we'll do it. Because they want us to tell them what to do. And we want to put this out to say, yes, here is something that we think is the best practice for now. And we're going to gain operational experience. And as time passes, we're going to take your experience and incorporate that into the next version, which is my intent. Okay? So more reviews, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Right, so continuing on the muddy topic of the Opsawg, the life cycle. There's a clicker if you want to use that, and those are the slides which you set as an update.
Hello, everyone. I'm Torsten, and based on the work from Elliot, Stephen and myself decided we want to write 2 lifecycle documents that explain basically what to do with mud. The first one is intended towards the manufacturers themselves and how we intend that they would use mud. The second document is for network operators and helping them to figure out what to do with mud. So the question like why we do this is mud can actually be really useful if it is used correctly. And that's probably true for every protocol. So the one of the main concerns actually is that with mud, we introduced something new for a lot of the manufacturing industry. Like companies that building fridges and microwaves are probably not that well versed in IP networking. So we hope we can help them with this. We also think it could be helpful for network operators themselves if we just tell them like how Elliot would like them to see using mud and how we would actually like that to be adopted. We just have to consider that all the IoT devices we get in our networks are just compromised or have like a really weak security model. So what we absolutely want to do is to block any unwanted traffic. That's something that we as network operators definitely want in our networks, but that's also what the rest of the internet would really like us to do. And we're potentially talking here about a really large number of devices, especially if you talk about the enterprise context, where we can easily see like thousands of new devices being added within a single campus network. And with MUD, we actually have the option as operators to have like a central point to manage a lot of our IoT infrastructure. And that definitely eases a lot on the management side and the OpEx side that we are all concerned about. And we can also like hope to put some best practices out there in the minds of the manufacturers themselves and actually telling them how they should use MUD to be seamlessly integrated into networks. And based on that, these are the 2 documents that we just submitted. The first one is for the network operators. The second one is for the manufacturers themselves. And there are actually 2 questions we would like to have. One is, does this work make sense? Is it something that this working group actually would like to see? And would you actually agree that this is something we should have? And the second is, of course, we would like to get feedback on the texts and the documents themselves.
Kent Watson, Juniper Networks, feedback on the text. In the security considerations section, it mentions the worst, if a compromised MUD file, the worst thing that can happen is that a device gets access to resources that it wouldn't have been able to access. And well, it's better than nothing because before it was already an overly open network to begin with. I actually don't think that's the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is a denial of service attack, where where you have MUD deployed and you're actually closing down the ability for proper device access.
I actually agree with you on this. Stephen and myself talked about this as well a lot. And we have already a couple of ideas. So watch out for the next version of the drafts. And we can hopefully address some of these concerns in it.
So first of all, Torsten, thanks very much for doing the drafts. It's important to get some operational experience on these things, and I really think these are a good start. What I see is the potential for a BCP over time to say, look, here's how best to use these things. And I would, my suggestion is to leave these documents open for a good while and do a couple of good increments, and then aim towards BCP well after the actual base specification is done shortly after the ACL model is done. And so what I would say is keep going, keep doing this, and let's talk to manufacturers together so that they can provide their input from their side, the customers from their side, and we can go to RIPE, NANOG, and other places and talk about this too.
Absolutely. There's also an interesting IoT security draft in the T2T-G at the moment being discussed. That's not submitted yet, but we would actually like to reference this heavily in our 2 documents. So this would need to wait anyway till all the other works in the research group and whatever is finished and shipped. But, we're not in a rush. We just want to get something out to get a discussion started.
Can I please get a show of hands of who have read this document, these 2 documents? Okay, so would really encourage the group to take a look at that, especially from the operators, and to provide feedback on how they see that, the usefulness, and what is needed. So basically, take a look at the documents and comment on that.
Thanks.
Thank you. So next up is the network artificial intelligence. Drew.
Hi, this is Dhruv. On behalf of my co-authors, I'm here present talking about network artificial intelligence, focusing on the use cases that we are thinking of where do we start applying AI and ML in the networks? Are we looking at the right set of use cases, and what are the considerations, especially from the operations side, that we need to consider? And that's the feedback we were looking for in this room. So just a quick introduction. We have been hearing about AI and ML for a while. There are other activities in the IETF and IRTF areas around it, but maybe focusing more from the implementers and proof of concept side, we have started looking at which are the areas we can start applying and experimenting with, and focusing mostly on whether our directions and the kind of use cases and the kind of data from the network that we are going to use, are we on the right direction or not? So the main aim is that can we apply AI, and can it help us in running the networks a little bit better? That's the main aim. We also want to analyze what kind of role does the SDN or a central controller can play in the overall AI, focusing mostly on can the controller takes more intelligent decisions, or can the controller be used as a control loop, so that once we have learned some intelligent decision, we use controller to actually go and make necessary changes in the device. So that kind of something that we need to, that we are focusing on. And the document talks about various possible use cases, and that's what we will be talking about. The key functions that we feel are needed, the telemetry is a big part of it. We need to also focus on the historical trends, like currently what a controller or a device has is the current state of the network. So we need to see if we can have an historical record of how the network has behaved in the various use cases, and also focus on the real-time telemetry data that can be collected, the ML models, and all the techniques related to that, the training, the classification, the use of the right ML model, etc. The kind of analysis that we would be doing and the framework that needs to be there, focusing on maybe detection, prescription, prediction, and the various other analytical things. But at the end, we need to make sure that it's done in a closed loop control way, and hopefully the SDN plays that role. So basically for these key functions, we need to build something that we call a network telemetry analytics engine. But where do we put this? Is this something, and how does it interact with the SDN? That's something that we need to focus. Currently, we feel that it is co-located with a controller. And then the question comes, what do we do for end-to-end networks and multi-controller environment? what is the relationship that we would like this kind of analytic engine to also play. So that is another consideration that we need to think about. So the use case that we are starting off with is using this for path computation and traffic engineering. So with our background, especially coming from the routing and the PCE and this side, we want to apply this to this domain and see if we can get some intelligent operations out of it. So PCE stands for path computation element. It has access to the current state of the network. That's the TEDB, the traffic engineering database. It also has all the other LSPs and the paths that are in the network. That's the LSPDB. So that's a normal PCE. But what we want to build is a historical records of how the network has changed, as well as how the paths have modified based on various different network events. And having that historical record, how can it fit into a good analytical engines, and what kind of use cases that we can drive if we have access to that data. Apart from the historical records, the telemetry is another parameters that are important, which would be the LSP parameters, what is the traffic performance, the delay, the jitter, and the kind of trend in which it is going, and using that information to let the PCE behave better. For example, can it be used to do the reoptimization and setting up of LSP in a much more intelligent way? Can it also be used for better bandwidth allocation, auto bandwidth, and other interesting features? So another key thing that we are evaluating is this just the LSP and the network, is it enough, or do we also need to know the context? And what I mean by context here is that what is this LSP actually used for? And how do we get that data, and how do we build that information into the analytical engine so that we could utilize this? So this is some of the first things that we are trying out, and we are presenting to get the feedback that whether the use cases and the telemetry data that we are looking into, is that the right approach or not. Moving on. The other thing that is basically BGP related monitoring data. So using BMP protocol to collect information, adding again the telemetry, especially focusing on the inter-AS links and getting the egress traffic engineering information, building a historical record. So this is something that actually even the BGP stream that was talked in NRP and other people are also looking at the various BGP open databases that are available, and using that information as well as the information that is generated live from the network. So combining that information, what kind of use cases we could develop is the identification of route leaks or BGP hijacks, etc., by using some intelligent detection and anomaly detection algorithms and pattern recognition, etc. Adding telemetry also helps us to do this intelligent traffic engineering, just like in the PCE use case, but focusing on the egress traffic engineering. In case of NFV, the problem, it's another interesting case where we want to collect data from multi-layers. As we know that there is a physical network, virtual network, VNFs, the MANO, all of them generating data. But to find a fault in this environment, it would be useful if we have some sort of a correlation between the data that is being generated in different layers, and the things are not done in silos. That virtualization layer only talks about virtualization. So using an NTA engine that can actually find correlations and maintain records, etc. And when we are doing health diagnostics or locating root cause analysis, using the data from all the various sources to help fault detection. This is something that we are still analyzing. The kind of data that we need and things is still up for debate. Something that we have started building here is the SFC solution, and SFC is also very interesting because it combines the network data, that is the one that you are getting from your underlay, what all the data that a service function forwarder or a switch would generate, and the data coming from the SFs, which is how your L4 to L7 device is behaving, what is the CPU usage, the memory, etc. So at the end, the aim of a service function chain is when both of them are optimized, and using this information, that is the data coming from the network as well as from the SF, building good correlation and optimizing them together with the help of NTA. Again, for telemetry, we are using host SFlow to get the data from the SFs, and gRPC and the SFlow functions also to get the network information, and using them together to build intelligence in the NTA. So what is the architectural consideration that we need to look at from NTA point of view is, where do we place this engine? Is this something that is co-located with the controller, or is it better to integrate it with the controller? There is pros and cons for both approach. Currently, we are focusing more on the co-located case. This also helps to look at the second problem, which is what do we do with multi-domain environments? At the same time, we also realize that doing analytics closer to the network would be much useful, rather than moving a large amount of data to a centralized space and then running the analytics. So having a hierarchy of NTA with local analytics being done closer to the network, and only the data that is actually needed to be sent to a centralized place would also help. Within an NTA, the building blocks are basically a telemetry collector or a data collector. Since we talked about multiple NTAs, there may be a need for moving the data. So what kind of channel do we need to build to move the data between the NTA, the analytical engine that is capable of doing both real-time and batch processing, integrating with the right set of ML models. Here again, right now, we are exploring using the open source ML models and ML libraries that are available, and seeing whether what kind of output they can produce when we feed this kind of data. And as you can realize that this is just experimentation at this stage, but we want to see, get the feedback if anybody else is looking in these directions, and what kind of feedback they can give us. With ML, visualization and closed loop interaction are equally important. So next step that we are looking here is, are these the right set of use case, especially from a network background? If we want to start experimenting with AI, are we looking at the right set of use case? Something where we have the data, something where we have some intelligent actions that we can actually take and trust the output of the AI that we are getting here. And from the architectural point of view, are we missing something? Are there any protocol consideration or operation consideration that we have not thought about? And possibly start building some prototype and use the IETF hackathon or one of the opportunities to start using open source and doing things. And Adrian is on the mic. I think I'm done.
Adrian Farrell, I like your 30,000 foot architecture picture. I think the blocks are right. On this slide, I think the bullet data movement, and on the next slide, the bullet protocol. If you can go back to slide 4 for me.
I have the control.
Right, there are there are 3 arrows on that picture, and the pink one, we know what that is. The 2 arrows, the 2 other arrows, the NTA into PCE and the network into NTA, are the things that are going to be moot for protocol development or not. It would be really helpful as a next step to understand the volume of data and the frequency, so that we can get an idea of whether this is just so much data that we need some bit compression algorithm, or whether IPFix does the job, or it's turning up in big blocks and bulk and we can ship it that way. At the moment, it's kind of a thought process in progress. And so that's, for me, the next step.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Apart from the protocol related to data movement, we are also exploring using the data bus technology and seeing what IoT and the open DDS and looking beyond just the protocols that maybe that we do it in the IETF and trying to see for data movement, do we need to look at something else as well? So it will be good to, I think, document that. Thanks.
Hi, Joe Clark, Cisco. Forgive me, maybe I'm really jaded on artificial intelligence with my company. I appreciate the drafts. I read them both. I agree with Adrian. Great, very high level overview. But when I saw artificial intelligence, I was like, okay, someone has thought about some models about what features we would select, what kind of logistic regression, clustering. It sounds like maybe that's your plan, but I guess my feedback would be maybe what you've got here, and you've used the word analytics and statistics a lot in your presentation, and I'm thinking what you have here is perhaps something that is, what do we do generally if we are going to think about analytics on large data sets and specifically to some of these use cases? But, and in fact, I believe the first sentence in the architecture draft is, there's a lot of, and I'm paraphrasing, a lot of buzz or this is a trend right now. And yes, and it could be network Skynet and yay. But I would say, let's focus the artificial intelligence when your research yields some actual models that can say, if you apply, we have found that these features in terms of using this particular algorithm with these selected features yield some very promising results that either identifies network anomalies or allows us to make actionable changes. And let's save the artificial intelligence there. And perhaps what you've collected is just in general a great set of, here's what we're thinking about what we might build for an analytics system in terms of data in, what kind of thoughts need to be given, like data compression type thoughts, and what we might need to build, and then try to focus on where and what we can do specific to artificial intelligence, because there's nothing in the draft right now about AI really at all.
I completely agree with that point. So I think within IETF, as you know, there are multiple places where this work, and MLRG is thinking about it. I was in the morning for ID Nets where they were talking about it, and where the researchers are usually the one who are driving this. I think our point of view was that as an implementer who wants to go into prototyping and trying what's out there in open source, am I going in the right direction? And as a set of people who are interested in this area, can we collaborate and start looking at the right set of use cases? I completely agree that what you are looking for would be the output of this exercise. And once we have that, we'll come back to the working group and talk about that as well.
So, Dhruv, that's a valid question, and we will return to that in a moment. One thing that I would like to ask, this work has been presented at last IETF in the routing working group, and you got extensive feedback on your architecture of this network artificial intelligence. Can you summarize the changes that you put into that since that presentation? What has changed since then?
As you would see that in this presentation, we did not talk too much about the architecture. We focused mostly on the use cases part. But as we are building these use cases and adding this architecture, maybe you will see those updated as well in the future version. But as you see, with the where do we find the home? I think that question, we are not in a hurry. We first want to build the meat in the document and have the document in a good shape. We are here just to get good feedback first and find collaborators. If anybody else who's working on this, especially from implementation and open source, and has good ideas where we can find good ML libraries and stuff, that's our main aim as of now.
Robin from Huawei, I will add some points, because the last meeting when we do the presentation, I think the audience, they pay much attention to the possible the choice of the protocol extension, so that they ask what the protocol may be used for the network artificial intelligence. So that is after we go on to do this work. So that is we propose a draft about the use cases, because that is in the high level, the architecture is maybe difficult to define the specific protocol, and also maybe this for different use cases, the protocol extension may be different. So that we think that maybe we from this use case begin our work, this may be more practical, and also the protocol extension choice may be specific. That is our work is after the last presentation. Okay. Yeah, and also that the concern about what OEM mechanism may be used, but now that is a lot of work we do on the in situ OEM, and also some other OEM mechanism may be taken into account. Yeah, so that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think same presentation is going to be presented in 20 minutes in routing. So I think next time again when we come back to this topic, we should much more meet on the bonds and not just use cases, but more tangible proposals, how to proceed, possibly more data about what's available, maybe in open source, what's available in general, and what you've been doing on it, not just what you think you could be doing.
Yes, thank you.
Bhushan Padiyar, AT&T. So this is a great idea, and you had a question like, where should this plugin lie, like with the controller or on the controller? Was
Yes.
that the second slide?
I think in the architectural consideration, yeah.
So here, I mean, the one thing to consider is like, if you are planning to build on the controller, are you a controller specific? Are you planning for any specific controller, Open Daylight or ONOS? Because Open Daylight has a plugin which is already doing this stuff as a network service functions. So I mean, if we are planning for Open Daylight, this is not as useful. But if you're planning for ONOS type controllers, this is very useful. And this thing needs a database with it, because when you start collecting all the data, it will be collected in a data store. So you need to think about the data replication techniques like Cassandra or LMR, Snappy, such type of technologies. Plus, this should have a view from the orchestration layer, from EMS layer, NMS, something. So that is a functionality you can add. And I think it should not be a part of a controller. It should be a part of same VNF on a same server. So that's
Co-located basically. Thanks.
Ignas Bogdanas, Equinix, speaking as an individual. So 2 comments on this document. One, it seems like a set of what I would call prescriptions or descriptions of the various components which are deployed, have been deployed for quite a while. And this doesn't seem that, it is called architecture and architectural considerations, but it's much more of the, say, more detailed design, how you build certain components, or how do you design certain product components out of that. The second one is, if you are looking more from the operational feedback, is IETF the right place for doing that? There might be operational forums, Nano, Gripe, and similar operation communities, which might provide much more realistic and up-to-date feedback on what is being deployed and what potentially could be done and what are the pain points. Not saying that this is the wrong place completely, but simply to consider probably looking into that community first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, the last one, carrier Wi-Fi calling deployment considerations.
Hello everyone, my name is Baiju.
This is a document on carrier Wi-Fi calling, and for any of you who is not familiar with the concept of carrier Wi-Fi calling, in this presentation I have included a couple of slides just going over what it is and what is the relevance in the industry. So these are the co-authors, Sri Gundavalli, who is in the room, along with Mark Grayson and Tommy Polly and Sami Tuati worked with me on this document. So just a brief introduction to mobile data and voice offload, and that will lead us to the context of this Wi-Fi calling.
There's no in the box.
Oh, okay. Okay. So is that better? Can you guys hear us? Hear me well? Okay. Sure. Is it better? Yes. Okay, good. So if you look at the top, this is a classical mobile network architecture wherein we have taken LTE as the example. So this is an end-to-end IP solution, but at the same time, right, on the access network side, it's licensed radio, then, signaling and bearer connections going towards a mobile packet core. And I'm not going to spend time digging into the various architectural components here. The only reason I included this here was just to contrast and look at what does it mean from a mobile data and voice offload perspective. And as all of you are familiar, right, because every time our handsets get connected to the Wi-Fi network, as long as we have the credentials to get access to the Wi-Fi network, whether it is our home residential gateway or hotspot or whatever, the mobile data, which was supposed to be steered back into the packet core, gets offloaded into the local network and into internet. But there are some scenarios where mobile operators would prefer to have that data taken back into the packet core for further processing and offer additional value-added services. So in such cases, there are Wi-Fi to packet core integration models available, and there are two flavors. One is called the Trusted Wi-Fi access network model, which is the bottom one you are seeing, wherein the mobile network operators may own the Wi-Fi access network, or they have some control over the manageability of the Wi-Fi access network. And in that case, they have good level of trust to the access network, and they use this TWAG gateway to steer the connection back into the core. And the second flavor is anybody's Wi-Fi access network, considered as an untrusted Wi-Fi access network. If they want to steer the traffic from the handset towards the packet core, they leverage an IPsec session and use a IPsec session termination gateway. In the 3GPP term, it is called APDG gateway. And that is what would be leveraged for the carrier Wi-Fi calling solution as well. So what is carrier Wi-Fi calling? So it is nothing but the mobile voice signaling and bearer data, which is typically carried over the licensed radio network and back into the packet core, and then the IMS for further processing, can be offloaded into a Wi-Fi access network. So the Wi-Fi access network is being used for addressing the coverage and capacity issues for the mobile network. And as far as the end-to-end solution is concerned, still the Wi-Fi signaling and bearer traffic is steered back into the mobile network operator's packet core for further processing. And this leverages typical solution today deployed by operators uses the untrusted Wi-Fi to packet core model, where there is a IPsec session taken directly from the handset towards the core. Now coming on to what is this draft about, the purpose of this draft is to provide a field reference document and include various architecture models which are possible for the Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi calling solution, along with some of the best practice recommendations for improving the performance and the end user experience as far as the Wi-Fi calling is concerned. And the focus has been on the Wi-Fi access network, the packet core integration aspects, as well as some of the end user handset characteristics. Target audience, all the mobile network operators could potentially leverage this from a best practices reference document perspective. The Wi-Fi operators, such as broadband operators who has got the public Wi-Fi footprint, or other hotspot providers, such as airport Wi-Fi providers, could potentially leverage this to fine-tune their Wi-Fi access network and work in roaming partnership with mobile operators so that this will be a monetization opportunity for them. And in enterprises, in many enterprises, there are coverage and capacity issues, but primarily the coverage issues when it comes to the mobile voice. So by turning on the carrier Wi-Fi calling, it is going to help the enterprises to address that for multiple operators, and along with that, improve the employee productivity. And of course, this would be of interest to the smartphone vendors as well. And the objectives, as I mentioned earlier, it is the primary objective is to act as a field reference guide, and there are several aspects of the Wi-Fi access network in terms of the radio network parameters, the QoS, and other aspects which can be fine-tuned to optimize the experience, end user experience from a Wi-Fi calling perspective, as well as automate the network discovery and seamless user authentication, and all those aspects are covered in this draft. So these are some of the architectural options which is covered in the document in detail, talking through different flavors of Wi-Fi access network to packet core integration model, and also a comparison between these different models and what are the pros and cons of going with one model over the other. And this is an extension of the architecture I touched upon earlier. So there are a lot more details of the architecture covered in the draft, cutting across various solutions. So just to touch upon the seamless subscriber onboarding. So this is a motivation for many of the Wi-Fi operators, hotspot providers, to go with the adoption of Passpoint or Hotspot 2.0, which provides a mechanism for compatible handset devices to automatically discover the network and identify the presence of the SSIDs dynamically, which are their own home operators SSIDs or their roaming partners SSIDs, and leverage pre-configured credentials such as SIM credentials or other EAP mechanisms to automatically onboard. And from that perspective, if the hotspot provider is different from the carrier, so obviously there is the potential for the roaming partnerships to establish the roaming relationship, and the carrier's SIM credentials can be leveraged for onboarding into a hotspot network for the subscriber's handset. From a network fine-tuning perspective, there are several areas for optimization available for the Wi-Fi access network, and accordingly, the quality of experience for the voice offload is going to improve, starting with the radio resource management. It can be standalone, it can be distributed model, or it can be cloud-based. Various aspects are available. And there are IEEE defined RF optimization aspects such as fast roaming for handsets needs to hand off the connectivity from one AP to another. The handoff process can be optimized by implementing this fast roaming feature, along with other optimization aspects such as proactively providing the neighbor list to the handset when it is ready to roam, or even doing a network assisted load balancing to distribute the load across the overlapping APs in a coverage area, etc. So these details are also covered in the document. And from the QoS perspective, there is wireless multimedia option available, which is an enhancement over 8.11e, which can be used to improve the overall quality of experience. It also even supports admission control for the voice, if that is desired to be implemented. And when it comes to core network QoS, depending upon the end-to-end architecture model, there might be some caveats if the connection is traversing over an internet backhaul. But in general, if this is a trusted network and the managed backhaul, and in the core also the QoS can be implemented. Last, just wanted to touch upon the enterprise Wi-Fi calling. In many of the enterprises, what happens is, due to historical reasons, IPsec is not allowed by the firewalls. It would be just because of the fact that they are not only allowing the web traffic, or in some cases due to security reasons. So in such cases, the Wi-Fi calling by default is not going to work because IPsec is a requirement for the solution. But there is a workaround available to deal with that. There is a draft which is on its way to becoming an RFC written to support IPsec over TCP, and in some cases IPsec over TCP with TLS, which can essentially take care of this Wi-Fi calling challenges with restrictive networks. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to touch upon overall the draft, what it covers. Looking forward to some feedback from the community. Please go ahead. Yeah. So this is it actually. I'm just looking forward to some feedback from the community and next. Yeah.
So with regards to that, it would be quite useful for IETF to have a kind of high-level overview of what 3GPP has delivered over the last 15 years. It's very useful, it's easy to read, and compared to 3GPP specs, it's good. So what's missing in the draft is normative references to all the 3GPP releases, where to find, because you are using 3GPP terminology all over the draft,
Right.
there are zero normative references. It would be easy to find and read the source. You really should have normative
Yeah,
references. in
absolutely.
draft.
Yeah, I will add those references. Thank
If you need any help, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, this is really good. Elliot again. This is really good work. And I did enjoy reading the draft. However, I had almost the exact same comment as the previous speaker in that you have to actually have the normative references for Hotspot 2.0 and other things.
Yeah, I'll add. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks. Show of hands, please. Who has read this document? Okay, thank you. Would really encourage the working group to take a look at that. There's good content there. Please read and comment. This brings, yes.
And here's why. One of the critical things that we're facing in the IoT space is onboarding. This is all about onboarding. If you haven't read this draft, you really need to read this draft because the whole onboarding process needs to be much better fleshed out. Warren has taken a shot at this repeatedly, I think, and a bunch of us are taking a shot. This is a really important piece of work.
Thanks, Elliot.
So if I can make a quick comment here, this is Sri Cisco. There is a lot of interest from the field, but in this working group, we haven't got much feedback. I'm wondering, if there's not much interest from the working group, if AD can sponsor it, I don't know what Benoit thinks. There's some key vendors on this document, and they believe this needs to be published.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Right, so this is coming to the end. This is coming to the end of the agenda. We have 3 minutes for the open mic. Anyone has any topics, concerns, suggestions? Any future possible topics for this working group? Just anything. Open mic. There seems there's nothing here. You have saved your 2.5 minutes for the coffee break, and with this, the meeting has ended. Thank you.
Anyone not in the blue sheet, please sign.
Thank you.
It's yours?
Yes, that's mine. I'm just using it.